Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting ready to get started. If you can find your seat. All right, I have 6 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call our May council meeting to order. And before I move on to the invocation and pledge of allegiance, I would just ask for everyone to please join me in celebrating Beth Meservey. She's our town clerk and clerk to council, and it is Municipal Clerks Week, and she does a fantastic job for us. So all please give her a round of applause. And we'll turn it over to Councilman Waring.
Please join me in prayer if you wish. Father God, we thank you for this beautiful evening that you give us. We thank you for the clearing of the rains and the rain itself that you gave us to help just clear the air, Lord, and start fresh. Lord, we ask you to please bless us and watch this meeting over us as we conduct this meeting and conduct the town's business. We ask you for your wisdom as we take up the actions that we have to take up tonight. Lord, and we ask for you to do all these things for the purpose of your glory and nothing further. Lord, we ask you please to continue to bless our public safety, to protect us here in our own town. We ask you to please look over the rest of our town staff and departments that do such a great job of keeping our town running. And we ask you, of course, to please protect the troops, to protect us at home and abroad. But we ask all these things in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball. Yeah.
We can have the members of the Somerville Fire and Rescue Department, as well as former fire chief / current council member Richard Waring down front.
anyway. Half of it's in the dining room. And then I'm gonna go get up. And I remembered Richard was over at the fire department helping cook dinners for, raise medical expense money for one of his children, one of our firemen. So I called him and I uttered the words you don't want to have to say. I said, I've fallen and I can't get out. Richard was there within 2 minutes, I believe, with another fireman. They got me up. I walked back out to the sunroom, sat down. Turns out I didn't do anything to it. It was fine. The fourth event was April the 13th of this year. Saturday afternoon, about 2 or 2:30. And I'm walking into the bedroom, and what I tripped on, I do not know. And down I went. And I couldn't get myself up. I said, what's wrong? And then I said, I got to call my standby. And I had to call Richard and utter those famous words again. I've fallen and can't get up. Richard was there within minutes. And I couldn't help him to help me get up. Next thing I know, the fire department's there. And they got me up and got me sit down and couldn't figure out what had happened. I looked at my knee. And it was just soaked in blood. So, oh Lordy. And I pulled my leg up. And I said, oh, I'll just spray this with some hydrogen peroxide. Pull the flap down and it'll be fine. I'll bandage it up. Richard said, Next thing I know, EMS is there. And in between the firemen, they were able to get this large sized child down the steps and into the ambulance to Charleston. The knee, by the way, was split from stem to stern, so I didn't have a chance. They always say that the proof is in the pudding. I have tasted the pudding. It was magnificent. These guys are the best in the nation. I guarantee you, they are just something else. And I thank Chief Melcher, his crew, Councilman Waring, and his father, if he's watching, former Mayor Ware. God bless you all. Join me in the Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Our first proclamation is for Water Safety Awareness Month. If we can have Joe Debney, the Somerville YMCA staff, Colleton and Dorchester County Parks and Rec, and Somerville Medical Center. Whereas the enjoyment of water-based activities enhances physical and mental well-being, fostering a sense of community and joy. And whereas the safety and well-being of individuals engaging in aquatic endeavors are paramount, requiring vigilance, education, and responsible practices. And whereas accidents and tragedies related to water occur annually, underscoring the need for comprehensive water safety awareness and preparedness. And whereas through collaboration, education, and proactive measures, we can mitigate risks and empower individuals with the knowledge and skills necessary to enjoy water activities safely. Now therefore, Mayor Russ Hutchberry and the Somerville Town Council do hereby proclaim the month of May as Water Safety Awareness Month. We commend the Somerville YMCA for its exemplary Splash into Safety program in partnership with Colleton County Parks and Rec, Dorchester County Parks and Rec, and Somerville Medical Center. This collaborative effort educates children and families on essential water safety skills, including swimming lessons, CPR training, and water rescue techniques. These partnerships serve as models for community-based water safety programs across the nation.
Country, we know that water is a real hazard, and I just thank you for y'all's efforts. and how you collaborate with so many different entities to make sure our children are as safe as possible. So thank you. Keep up the great work.
Next is Public Works Week. Bonnie Miley, Town Engineer, and any members of the Public Works Department. Whereas the infrastructure of our nation forms the foundation upon which our communities thrive and flourish, and whereas through their tireless efforts, public works professionals ensure the safety, functionality, and sustainability of our roads, bridges, water systems, parks, and other essential facilities. And whereas the town of Somerville's exemplary streets department, stormwater department, and engineering department demonstrate outstanding commitment to excellence, innovation, and service in the fields of public works. And whereas their collective efforts contribute significantly to the overall well-being and prosperity of the town of Somerville. Now therefore, Mayor Russ Hutchberry and the Somerville Town Council do hereby proclaim May 19th through the 24th, 2024 as Public Works Week, and urge all citizens to join them in expressing heartfelt gratitude to the streets, stormwater, engineering, and maintenance departments, and all public works professionals for their dedication, expertise, and unwavering commitment to building and maintaining the infrastructure that strengthens our community and enriches our lives.
Ms. Miley sitting down, I just want to let her know we appreciate your leadership in that space as the recent department head. I think your team is doing a fantastic job. And on a day like today, where would we be without our stormwater folks? Right, so thank you.
Next is Economic Development Week. Frank Neal, the Director of Community and Economic Development. Whereas economic development is a fundamental driver of prosperity, opportunity, and progress in our communities. And whereas economic development initiatives, policies, and investments foster job creation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and sustainable growth. And whereas the collaboration between government, business, educational institutions, nonprofits, and community organizations is essential for cultivating vibrant and resilient economies. And whereas by promoting economic development, we strengthen the foundation for a brighter future for generations to come. Now therefore, Mayor Russ Hutchberry and the Somerville Town Council do hereby proclaim May 6th through the 19th, 2024 as Economic Development Weeks, and urge all citizens to join them in acknowledging the vital role of economic development in shaping our communities, and reaffirm our commitment to fostering sustainable economic growth and prosperity for all.
Again, thank you, Frank, for stepping into this role and tackling economic development without our economic vitality. I see our partner, Steve, with the Dream back there. We don't have opportunities for our citizens to enjoy a high-paying wage and all the offerings of good restaurants, nice shops, and a quality place to live. So thank you. Keep up the good work.
And finally, we have a special citizen recognition, Matthew Ernst. Dear Matthew, I hope this letter finds you in great spirits and with a heart full of pride, because today is a day worth celebrating. It brings me immense joy to extend my warmest congratulations to you on achieving the highest honor in scouting, the Eagle Scout Award. Earning the Eagle Scout rank is no small feat. It represents the culmination of years of hard work, learning, and growth. As an Eagle Scout, you join a prestigious group of individuals who have gone on to become leaders in their communities and beyond. Your accomplishment is a testament to your character, integrity, and the values instilled in you through the Scouting program. I'm particularly impressed by your completion of the Eagle Scout project, installing a split rail fence along a canal cutting through Azalea Park to help promote safety for kids and families. This project not only showcases your leadership skills and organizational abilities, but also highlights your genuine concern for the well-being of others. Your initiative will undoubtedly contribute to the safety and enjoyment of the park for years to come, leaving a tangible legacy of your dedication to community service. Once again, congratulations on this incredible achievement. Your Eagle Scout Award is a badge of honor that you can wear with pride for the rest of your life. I have no doubt that you will continue to make a positive impact on the world around you, and I wish you all the success and happiness that you deserve. Mayor Russ Tutchberry.
I'm not an Eagle Scout, but if there's another Eagle Scout out here, I'd love to see you raise your hand. Hey. Nothing excites me more than when a young leader, a future leader, devotes themselves to the purpose of a greater good. And what you did at Azalea Park is something that will potentially save lives and provide a safer park experience for others. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, we have approval of minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval of, items A, B, and C.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve minutes A, B, and C. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Next, we have Clay Cooper from Woda Cooper Companies.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Clay Cooper. I'm our Director of Development with Woda Cooper Companies. And I am here to present Sawmill Crossing to you all, which is a proposed development located at 615 North Cedar Street. So a little bit about us. Woda Cooper Companies, we are a vertically integrated company. We do the development, construction, and manage our own properties. We've been in business for over 30 years. We have 330 communities, 16,000 units, 30,000 residents, and we've done $1.5 billion in investment in affordable housing. We are a unique developer. Our average unit size is approximately 50 units. So we like to do kind of smaller infill projects. And we have a long-term commitment to be a part of the community. As a vertically integrated company, we do all the aspects. We're here for a long time. We are not in the business of developing, constructing, and then flipping these properties. We're here for the long term. Specifically, our experience here in South Carolina, we have 11 properties across the state. You can see the chart on the right where we have them. The two at the bottom are either under construction or about to start construction. Our closest property is Oak Hollow. It's a 44-unit single-family development just outside of Somerville in the county. So a question was brought up, why this site? And so we apply for tax credits through South Carolina Housing, and we have identified this site as a very competitive site for that financing. It has access to a lot of jobs within a 1-mile radius. It's in an opportunity zone, and a lot of the scoring includes being near amenities like grocery stores, pharmacies, and urgent cares, all within a mile driving distance. And it's also located within a redevelopment plan in Somerville, which is a point item as well. Moreover, we have great access to transit there, close proximity to jobs, like we said, and with future improvements, the widening of Highway 78 by SCDOT and infrastructure improvement, we think that this will be a good addition to the downtown corridor here. So the design, it's a 42-unit proposed development that we have. The minimum that we can go to is 40 units for the financing that we're going for. We have 66 parking spaces, 6 1-bedroom units, 25 2-bedroom units, and 11 3-bedroom units. We are maintaining that setback per the UCMX zoning district, but we are including that additional buffer along Highway 78 to leave space for that planned SCDOT road widening as part of our development. We want to make sure that we accommodate for that. And then some of our standard, features or amenities are a leasing office, a fitness center, a business center, playground, and grill patio area for residents. And to give you a little bit of an idea of the timeline for our financing, our applications are due at the end of this month, and we would not hear back on the financing until September. So that's the timeline for this development. And then after we get the award of credits, those get competitively bid to a bank or a tax credit syndicator, and that can take upwards of 6 months to finalize that. And then it's about a 14-month construction period after that. So we are here to request a letter of support. In order to apply for the state credit here in South Carolina, we have to get a letter of support from you all. And we want to do that in lieu of going for, the nonprofit tax exemption. We are not a nonprofit, but we partner with several. And we're here for the long term. We feel that contributing to the tax base is being a better neighbor than getting that tax exemption. For us, it's easier just to partner with a nonprofit and get that full tax exemption rather than coming here before you all. But again, we're here for the long term, and our $16.5 million total development cost projected for this would potentially bring about $86,000 to $87,000 in additional tax revenue. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions. Just wanted to keep it short. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, any questions?
Is there any possibility of retail on the first floor?
I can look into it. It does make it difficult because we are pledging to restrict our rents. Our average person in this is a 60% AMI tenant. Our rents range from $270 to $950 for ones, $315 to $1130, and $345 to $1245. We just don't have that revenue like a market rate developer would have, nor that scale to finance it and bring that mortgage on to finance it. So it does make it difficult to do that. So we can try and look at it. We have some retail partners, but I would say the likelihood is very minimal.
I noticed in several of your developments that I looked up, you mix a lot of brick with vinyl siding. Are you looking to do that same kind of product, vinyl siding with brick here?
Yeah, so we would follow whatever the local zoning is. We like to use a mix of some sort of masonry. If vinyl is something that is not wanted, we would use hardy. But yeah, some sort of mixture of a masonry with vertical and horizontal siding together to break up the facade. So yes, we'd be happy to do a mixture of materials.
Will you have a full-time manager and a full-time maintenance person on staff there at all times?
Yes, so our full-time manager would be there 40 hours a week, and same thing with the service technician. And that service technician is also, we have an emergency line as well for certain emergencies that are 24/7. So yes, it would be 40 hours a week.
Sir, can I ask you one question?
Yes, sir.
This is affordable housing, right? Will it be income-based?
Yes, sir. So the way the tax credit program works is we pledge to restrict our rents, and in turn, those folks have to meet a certain income requirement. To give you an idea, the 60% AMI limits here in Somerville, one person can move into, an apartment and make up to $44,160. A family of four, about $63,000 a year. So yes, those folks have to income qualify. There's no subsidy other than, we get the tax credit and we competitively bid that to an investor. These folks are hardworking folks that have to pay that rent. They're not getting a voucher from the federal government to pay that rent. If that makes sense.
So you will not be accepting Section 8?
We by fair housing standards, we do.
Right.
We just don't have any project-based, is what I should say, is we don't have any
Okay.
project-based rental assistance associated with this, but under fair housing laws, yes, we would accept a housing choice voucher.
And did I hear you say that this project will be multiple stories?
Yes, sir. It would be a 4-story building,
And how many units are you going to build for?
42.
42?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that would comply with the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
We actually have more parking than is required per the zoning. You know, the national average is about 1.3 parking spaces per unit. I believe we were at about 66 parking spaces. We probably have a little bit more room to add some, but we're trying to keep that rear setback pretty far off the street, and then same with that front setback, so we can accommodate that highway expansion.
And you'll have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms?
Yes, sir.
So you'll accommodate families,
Yes, sir.
people who have children, that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to just wanted to thank you for coming tonight and giving the extra information and the extra information that was provided on Monday night when we had the planning committee meeting. That was very helpful. Naturally, tonight we're not here to discuss the zoning requirements or anything of that nature, but it does kind of help us to know what's being proposed to be able to make a decision on whether or not, you know, the support letter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do apologize for not responding. I saw y'all's email yesterday, this afternoon, and didn't get a chance to respond in time to contact you back.
Oh, no worries. We were a little late to reach out, so it's on us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, any other questions? Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right. As we head into public comment period, I wanted to try to remind some folks of a few things. First of all, public comment period is a time where council listens to the public, and it's not a two-way conversation. This first public comment period is for items that are on the agenda. We have a public comment period later on in the meeting for items that are not on. We have the 5-minute time limit, and out of respect for each other, we hold that very tight. So as soon as we see the 5 minutes has eroded, I'll speak up and say thank you for your comments. Repetitiveness, while it reemphasizes a point, doesn't necessarily value everybody's time. So if somebody has already said something that you agree with, it's very easy for you to not reiterate all of the same facts, but that you say that you agree with them and this is where you stand on the ordinance or whatever item on the agenda. And if you are with a group who's been organized to come here and speak, if you would select a spokesperson, that spokesperson can do the commenting for you. They can recognize the folks who stand in agreement. And if there are any key points that the spokesperson may have missed, you can fill in those details at your time. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Beth.
Dickie Myler.
Mayor, good evening, town council. Before I get started, I thought that I was listening to the Prince of Tides, where you gave that wonderful dissertation of the police department. That man is a gifted warrior, to say the least. I understand, Mr. Mayor, that what I have to talk about tonight, the hate ordinance, is an emotional issue on both sides of the aisle, and I respect all those who disagree with me. And I just thank you that together we can find what we need to find. Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of or abridging the freedom of speech, meaning government may not jail, fine, or impose civil liability on people based on what they say or write, except in exceptional circumstances. That's your First Amendment. No state shall deprive any citizen of life, liberty, or property without due process, nor deny any person the equal protection of the laws. That's your 14th Amendment. You swore an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution and the state of South Carolina. As we speak, the state of South Carolina has not passed an hate ordinance legislation. While I believe the intent of council in my heart was well-meaning when you wanted to pass this ordinance, because if you read it, it sounds really good. To protect our residents and visitors and to deter crimes that are motivated by bias and hate with the intent to intimidate. Well, this on surface sounds great with a lot of good merit, but if you'll dig down to the weeds, you'll find the devil in the details. with significant negative overturns for the future. Why? Because it's impossible to legislate personal emotions, feelings, desires, and intentions. Words like hate, bias, perception, intimidation, prejudice, all ambiguous, with a very subjective and personal interpretation. This type of ordinance, my friends, is far-reaching because of its open-endedness and a potential to our affront of First Amendment constitutional rights. Also, it removes from law enforcement any idea of consistent and absolute fairness and equity when handling a crime scene. Our state majority leader, Shane Massey, has recently said, this type of legislation does not do very much at all to deter crimes. In fact, it would require judges and juries to peer into the minds and beliefs of defendants rather than determine the facts of the case. Even our own distinguished town attorney has agreed with this by saying, I agree with those who argue the penalty will not act as a deterrent for violation of the ordinance. I want to look at a bigger picture for all of us. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before and built this great town to what it is. In my hand, I have a petition of over 300 people who love this town, who have signed it and endorsed it, people that you know and I love. It is a broad list of people: Asian, Hispanic, white and black, young and poor, rich, famous, Republican, Democrat, single and married, Protestants, Mormons, Pentecostals, lawyers, doctors, educators, former school principals and teachers, business owners, CPAs, engineers, retired law enforcement personnel and highway patrolmen, and those who educated you in college, and those that support you now in your work, those who voted for you, and those who have supported you for many, many years. Why do I say this? Because it's all about us, because we stand together. And I know right now we also have the support of 5 previous town councilmen: Mike Dawson, Howard Bridgman, Steve Bueller, Jan Wayne Woods, and Walter Bailey. We also have the support of 2 former mayors, Wiley Johnson and Bill Collins. What they've all told me in a resounding voice is we do not need more government regulation. Less government is best government. We do not need it. It's a resounding voice. Somerville has grown in leaps and bounds. And as a realtor, I can tell you right now, the economic engine is great. There is no fear of losing economic drive by not having a hate ordinance. Think about this. 5 Fortune 500 companies are coming here in droves. Schools are bursting. We have over 7,000 homes permits. The economic engine is great. But I want to say real quickly this. The First Amendment prevents the exercise of governmental viewpoint discrimination, which that is. It prohibits the government regulation of free speech, which it could, and it protects symbolic speech and expressive conduct. I pray that as you hear comments from both sides, that you will pause and think for a second what you are elected to do, to represent the voice of the people, not always 100% in agreement, but always with the best mind for Somerville and its future.
Thank you,
This
Mr.
ordinance
Myler.
was wrong.
Next, we have Natanya Miller.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and thank you so much for having me be here tonight. My name is Natanya Miller, and I'm the Director of Educational Initiatives for the Charleston Jewish Federation. As part of my portfolio, I have the privilege of working with community members of all ages to understand, recognize, and confront hate. I am here tonight asking you to pass the hate intimidation ordinance. Just this week, yesterday in fact, we received a report of a swastika that was drawn on the sidewalk of a home in your community. Multiple community members, non-Jewish, banded together to try and remove that symbol of hate. They were unsuccessful. They did report it to police. The police were very compassionate. But that swastika did exactly what it was intended to do. It caused fear, it promoted hate, and intimidated community members. South Carolina does not have a hate crime law, and hate groups know that. They are moving here in droves because they are safe. I know that Somerville residents are better than things like that graffiti that was drawn. They're the community members who banded together to remove that symbol of hate. This ordinance does not create new laws. It simply enforces ones that are already there. Many of your surrounding communities already have passed these. In fact, North Charleston is voting on theirs tonight. This is also personal. As the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, I am watching the rampant rise of anti-Semitism. I work daily to educate community members, Jewish and non-Jewish, on how to confront hate and how to stop the spread of hate and anti-Semitism. I'm calling on you to do the same. Show your residents that they are welcome and protected here in Somerville, no matter their race, their color, their creed, their religion, ancestry, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, physical and mental disabilities, and their national origins. Thank you.
Tom Tremaine.
Hello, thank you for letting me share my opinion. First off, I in no way condone or support crimes that are motivated by bias or hate in any way. That being said, I would ask you not to pass this ordinance. I don't think it is a good ordinance. I read through the body of it and I could not understand it. If you look at the fourth line, it says that if a person commits a crime because of the actual or perceived race, color, creed, religion, ancestry, gender, sexual orientation, gender again, gender identity. It does that in several paragraphs, says gender, gender identity, gender. I don't know if that's a typo or a subliminal message, but so the physical or mental disability. So I was confused and concerned by the phrase because of the actual or perceived combination. I used to teach English, and so I went to the dictionary to make sure I was understanding the words correctly. When I looked up actual, it says existing in fact or reality. When I looked up perceived, it said to become aware of or conscious of. So it's a matter of perception, the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, perception. Unfortunately, perception is not always based in reality. I was walking through my yard a couple of summers ago and I almost stepped on a snake. And it startled me and it scared me and I almost had a heart attack until I looked again and realized that it was the garden hose. But my perception had deceived me because the reality was it was not a snake. It was a garden hose. So I think we have to be very careful about formulating an ordinance based on those kind of contradictory terms, actual versus perceived. I didn't even know we had that choice. But I think this ordinance will cause more problems than it solves. I think it will open a can of worms that we won't know what to deal with. I mean, they're already out there, but let's don't throw more into the pile. I mean, just looking at the additional, I guess this is additional where the officers are going to investigate and have the 15 item list where they're going to have to put all the details together of the event as it occurred. I pity the officer that's going to have to go through and try to distinguish between actual and perceived. One thing I did kind of contemplate, I may use that should I ever be stopped for a speeding violation and the officer comes up and says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I might say, "Well, do you want my actual speed or my perceived speed?" Because I just don't really understand how that works. But so I would just discourage you from passing this ordinance. Thank you.
Jennifer McNamara.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I'm here tonight to speak to you, I'd like to speak against ask you to vote against the hate ordinance, because I am concerned we could have great error and misinterpretation, because there will be situations where it will be impossible to distinguish a belief system from an emotion. And I don't think we're taking into account the biology of fear. When a person's sympathetic nervous system is activated, their behavior and their actions are controlled by their hindbrain, by the amygdala, and they respond by fight, flight, or freezing. Therefore, anger or aggressive behavior can be a source of fear, not malice. And how will we judge this? If let's say someone has been abused by an orange person, and then they're involved and they have a history of traumatic abuse with someone who's orange, and then they're involved in a crime with someone who is orange, they could say and act in ways that are dictated by a stress response. But my experience as a clinical social worker, I can tell you that people are multiplicitous and they are complicated. And I am very concerned that our prisons are full of people who are already suffering from complex trauma. And then we could potentially be adding on graver sentences for people in those instances. So, and I also am concerned about the methodology that the police will be using to investigate. I just ask that you consider this and do not pass this. Thank you.
David Neal.
County Council. My name is David Neal. I live at 1104 South Main Street in Somerville, where the speed limit is 35 and cannot be enforced by our police department, obviously, because we don't have enough of them. I appreciate them. We don't have enough of them, and now you're going to put another ordinance on them. This ordinance, as read, and I hope people read it, is clearly unconstitutional under the absolute protection provided by the First Amendment of the Constitution, which you swore to uphold. Congress shall not make no law abridging the freedom of speech. This is precisely the situation where a local government sets itself up above the fundamental law of the land, enshrined in both national and state levels. But it also violates the common sense understanding of the agreement among the founders that the First Amendment was both a bar to governments to act as to abridge fundamental rights, but should be a warning that in a moral and religious people, quoting John Adams, to choose any other course of action would be madness, endangering the rights of every one of us. This ordinance is unnecessary to a moral and religious people. The golden rule would suffice in this regards. The commandment from Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." St. Paul, the apostle, read correctly as he warned that the proliferation of laws is dangerous to every believer and citizen because it codifies the opposite of what is intended, that the order to punish any so-called hate crime, one must define, redefine, redefine, redefine the concept of hate, which motivates every crime. Quoting John Braun here, in my last paragraph, the ordinance is worst of all cynical. It serves only the interests of the political class, of whom money and power are the mother's milk that promotes the fomenting turmoil and disagreement where none whatsoever actually exists. Unless it also serves the interests of the rights of lawyers mainly, and their client base of needy people who rather be productive and square with everyone, giving us good as they get, would make a battlefield of every facet of this life. On the Somerville police blotter, in one shift, a 12-hour shift, our finest answered 182 calls in a 12-hour shift. That's a lot of calls. And you're going to put an ordinance on them? And you're putting more people in here and more people in here? I'll leave you with this. We've quoted a lot of the Bible tonight, but I'll leave you with Isaiah chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. You can look it up. Great prophet. This is what he said, and I think we should listen. Woe to those enacting crooked statutes and writing oppressive laws, to keep the poor from getting a fair trial and to deprive the needy among my people of justice. Don't vote for the ordinance. Please don't. Thank you.
Mary Glaze,
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, good evening. This is a first for me. I've never stood before a group to say what was on my heart. But having lived in Somerville for 28 years, I've come to love this town, and I care about the direction in which it goes. Much of what I wanted to say has been said, but if I understand things correctly, this ordinance at its core can be reduced to a single word, and that is money. Are we surprised? I ask if we are so desperate for business that we bow to these companies that require us to conform to their ideologies. Do we conform to the current social climate? Do we let political correctness win the day? This is only the beginning of their demands. If we surrender ourselves to these ways of operating, then the face of Somerville will be changed forever. We've already heard about freedom of speech, and it is very important. With the stroke of a pen, are you going to trample on that? It is one of the most cherished and primary principles of our great country. Be very careful how you tread on our Constitution. My great hope is that each of you still has a mind open to listening and to critical thinking. Please read and become more informed before you pass this ordinance. Discuss and wrestle with understanding the real problems this ordinance will bring to our town. Being fully and truthfully informed is needed for a free people. There are questions that need to be addressed before you shackle Somerville with this ordinance. We all need to know the answers from you. In conclusion, respect and civility toward others should be the rule in our town. I have found it to be that way. But those values are learned at home, at church, in sports leagues, and in school. Unfortunately, another law is not going to diminish hate in the human heart. And if hateful speech and actions become lawlessness, let the effective present laws take effect. Please don't add more unnecessary burdens to our law enforcement and the courts. This law will cause more problems than you hope to eliminate. I say we don't need it. Money is not our God, and free speech belongs to all. Consider well. I thank you for your time, your consideration, and due diligence on this very serious matter.
David McNamara.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for having us tonight. I just got to say, for a first timer, she said pretty much everything that's on her mind, and she should be a full timer because she's very good at that. It's hard to oppose a law like ordinance like this based on the language. I mean, who would be opposed to hate? Who would be against, a law that tamps down on hate? It makes you feel good to have an ordinance like this. But there's a problem with it. I mean, the problem with that is we already have laws on the books to protect people. Now we're getting into where we're protecting feelings. I have no doubt the trauma that people have experienced due to hate, due to prejudice, all of that. But that is not the government's job to protect feeling. It's the community, that's the places of worship, that's the family. So the message that this sends is not the message that I think a lot of people are hoping it's going to send, which is we're standing up against hate. This is, we're giving our government more leeway to be very subjective about what crimes are. That's not the message I want to send to my children, is that look to the government to protect your feelings. If you're Jewish, you're Black, you're Puerto Rican, you be proud of who you are. We all stand with you as a community. We're proud of your history. And that's where this belongs. It doesn't belong in a government for someone else to decide what that is. And just the last thing to say is, as far as the law enforcement, looking at this, more red tape, more paperwork, our law enforcement needs more support. They don't need more paperwork. Thank you very much.
Jennifer Vendetti.
Little shorter than he is, so I had to pull that down. Hi, I'm Jennifer Vendetti, and I believe that we all deserve equal protection, whether you're a visitor or a citizen here in Somerville. But our laws already address crimes and their penalties. The resolution being approved will only do the opposite of its supposed intent. There's no need for the resolution, and I implore you to vote no. It is impossible to objectively determine a person's intent when committing a crime. The focus should be on hard evidence that can be dealt with justly in a court of law. Our town cannot afford to turn into the thought police. God will be the ultimate judge of our morals and character. It is something that can't be tangibly judged. So I think that I would implore you to vote no against the resolution. It's not needed. And thank you for your time.
Brian Prothero.
Dear Mayor and Town Council members, I want to express my appreciation for your hard work and dedication that you bring to serving our community. My name is Brian Prothero, and I am a resident of Somerville's Historic District, along with my husband, Brad Erickson. I'm here today to express our strong support for the proposed hate intimidation ordinance that is under consideration. As newcomers to Somerville in 2021, Brad and I have been deeply touched by the warmth and hospitality extended to us by our neighbors and new friends. However, amidst this hospitality, we have also encountered instances of hate directed at us as a same-sex couple. On several occasions, while taking a brief stroll to the town square, we have been subjected to verbal harassment from passing motorists who have shouted derogatory slurs at us. Faggots. Faggots. I have intentionally included this word to provide insight into the fear and distress we experience as targets of such hate speech. Growing up, I learned the hard way that those words were often followed by a fist. We understand and respect the importance of free speech, and we also believe that there must be measures in place to protect vulnerable members of our community from targeted hate and intended intimidation. The proposed ordinance seeks to enhance penalties for individuals who commit crimes with the intent of intimidating others based on factors such as race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and more. It does not infringe upon free speech rights, but rather proposes penalty enhancements for those who speak hate and then act upon it. I repeat, it does not infringe upon the First Amendment. It proposes penalty enhancements for those who speak hate and then act upon it. Allow me to emphasize that this purpose of this ordinance is not to stifle speech. Persons will continue to have the right to use disgraceful and hateful speech, but rather to deter harmful actions that may stem from their hateful speech. Imagine the fear and vulnerability one feels when they are targeted with such derogatory slurs merely because of who they are. The ordinance provides a sense of hope and relief to individuals who may find themselves in such distressing situations, knowing that if that perpetrator were to get out of his vehicle with a baseball bat and hit them, that there would be additional penalties for his actions. South Carolina is one of the few states that does not have penalty enhancements for crimes motivated by race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and age. While it would be my hope that the state would one day wise up and change this soon, the town of Somerville can and should take action now to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, the most vulnerable like Jesus spoke of. By passing this ordinance, Somerville will be sending a clear message that hate and bias have no place in our town. It would reaffirm the values of Southern hospitality that we hold dear and demonstrate our commitment to creating a safe and inclusive community for all residents. Thank you again for considering our perspective. We are hopeful you will vote in favor of this ordinance to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. Let us take a stand against hate and intolerance and work towards a brighter, more inclusive future for Somerville. Thank you.
Brad Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. You just heard some of the story that I was going to tell by my husband, Brian, but I do want to add a couple of things. First of all, we moved here almost 3 years ago from California with a dream to set up an artist residency. And in the intervening years, we've set up a nonprofit. We've attracted over 100 artists, scholars, and clergy from all over North America and from beyond. And to a person, they love this town. They have felt welcomed by the people of this town as welcomed as we have mainly felt in our experiences here. And we are delighted to be able to share this really lovely place with them. But I have to tell you that the incidents that Brian talked about are real, and they've happened not once, not twice, but a number of times as we walk downtown on Central Avenue from our home. When someone is passing by in a pickup truck and screaming faggot out the window, it's frightening. It's meant to be frightening. We're grown men. This has happened to me, I'm sorry to say, a number of times across the country. But even when it does, I can't help but wonder if that pickup truck is going to stop. Are we going to meet the perpetrators in a darkened corner? Are they going to jump out and attack us? That's what they want us to be thinking about, and we can't help but. Gay people in this country suffer gun violence at twice the rate of straight people, twice the rate. So there's a reason why we're frightened. They may not know that statistic, but they know that we're frightened, and we are, for a reason. Because hateful, intimidating speech too often does become hateful, violent action. This ordinance says to residents and visitors of our town that Somerville rejects bigotry and hatred, that we stand for a diverse and inclusive community where every law-abiding person is welcome and safe. We've heard tonight, some have said this law isn't necessary. I hope that stories like mine and others will tell you that it is. Some have said that this ordinance is government overreach. Well, protecting its citizens is one of the core purposes of government. Some have said that this ordinance would threaten our rights of free speech, but no, if you read the ordinance itself, it does not become a crime unless another crime is first committed. As it says, hate intimidation may not be used as a standalone crime. Those bigots can still scream faggot out their window at me. It is not a crime. If they jump out of that pickup truck and hit me with a baseball bat, then the penalty is worse. Some have said that this law lacks teeth, that it's mainly symbolic. I disagree, but even if that's true, symbols are important. That flag is a symbol. The Pledge of Allegiance we all just did tonight is a symbol of our loyalty and patriotism. The crosses on our churches and on our tombstones are symbols of a faith that many of us hold dear. Symbols are important. And by passing this law, Somerville sends a strong message that we are about inclusion and we are not about bigotry. But similarly, rejecting this law sends a message as well. And it says that hateful speech in Somerville is A-OK. Some have said that this ordinance is overworried. Some have called it woke. Laws like this have been passed by every single state in the nation except ours and Wyoming, which means that every other single state in the South has passed this. So when you have Alabama and Mississippi and Florida all agreeing on something, I think we could be pretty sure that it's not lefty or woke. Jesus said, inasmuch as that if you've done this to the least of these, you've done it to me. Who are the least of these tonight? Are they not the most vulnerable among us? The folks most likely to be targeted by hate speech and hate crimes, the individuals and groups named in this ordinance. And for those of us who say that we follow Jesus, are we not compelled by his words to protect our vulnerable neighbors? Thank you for considering this law, and I urge you to vote yes tonight.
Greg Johnson.
How you doing? My name's Greg Johnson, 200 Fries Way. In Somerville here. While you've heard a lot of emotional pleas for this ordinance, I'm here to tell you to vote against it. I sent all of you an email last week with a law review from Pace Law Firm. It's a few years old, and it actually talks about the constitutionality of hate crimes. I sent you the whole review. It's probably, I think, 15 pages long. In the email body I sent you, I put in some highlights. I'm going to read it here, those same highlights, so that it's on the record. The first problem with this ordinance, as with all the ordinances around the country, is the vagueness that's in it. It's unenforceable, it's vague, and it's been, the vagueness is evidenced in a recent case in New Jersey where the state versus Pomaniak, I'm not probably saying that right, in which the defendant was convicted of bias harassment. Interestingly, according to a provision of New Jersey's hate crime statute, a defendant may be guilty of bias intimidation if the victim reasonably believed that the offense was committed with a purpose to intimidate the victim, or the victim was selected to be the target of the offense because of his race or color. And it goes on, gender, all those stuff. The Section 2C 1618 places a focus on the victim's state of mind and not the defendant's state of mind. The New Jersey Supreme Court held that the Section 2C 16183 was unconstitutional due to its vagueness. The court stated, when focus is on the victim's perception and not the defendant's intent, the statute does not give a defendant sufficient guidance or notice on how to conform to the law, so the conviction was reversed. Okay, so he didn't get this hate crime conviction on him. Another controversial issue surrounding the implementation of hate crime legislation is whether these laws violate the First Amendment, the double jeopardy clause, or equal protection rights. The first constitutional concern is that penalty enhancement provisions in hate crime legislation violate an individual's rights against double jeopardy. The double jeopardy clause protects against multiple punishments for the same offense and prohibits multiple prosecutions for the same offense. This is evidenced when a defendant is charged and convicted of an assault and his or her original sentence for assault is enhanced because the prosecution has additionally proved that the offender had the specific intent to injure the victim based on their protected status. This defendant is being duly punished, once for his acts and again for an intent. Opponents of hate crime laws also argue that these laws may raise constitutional problems because they punish not only action, but also speech and thoughts or beliefs in violation of the First Amendment. To punish individuals because of bad political words expressed during a crime is to punish him extra because of the beliefs that he holds. As one critic has stated, quote, "The problem with hate crime laws is that in order to crack down on hateful behavior, hateful thoughts and expressions must also be targeted, which runs diametrically counter to the First Amendment protections for free speech and expression." He also stated that if the Constitution means anything, it means that individuals have the right to speak freely and even jest, even when the speech is politically incorrect, and should not be penalized because others take offense. The argument is that free speech is a vital part of our democracy, that hate crime statutes present a slippery slope. Hate crime legislation unconstitutionally punishes speech that might cause offense and criminalizes behavior regardless of a person's intent to cause intimidation or to act on the basis of improper bias. Opponents of hate crime also argue that hate crime legislation may also violate a person's right to equal protection, which is protected under the 14th Amendment. When applied, these hate crime laws seem to value the safety of certain victims above the safety of others. For example, when a homosexual is a victim of vandalism, the offense is motivated by bias, the offender will receive enhanced punishment. This places a value on the homosexual's life that is higher than that of a heterosexual's life. In addition, it is unfair that the federal government can aid a hate crime victim's life in a way that would not be offered to a victim of a crime not motivated by prejudice. For example, the long arm of the federal government could assist in the hate crime offender's arrest because the hate crime laws mandate that an offender's information be shared among state, local, and federal agencies. Thus, the federal aid in the apprehension of hate crime offenders is placing the hate crime victim's safety above the safety of others. So basically, you're going to hear a lot of emotional pleas here tonight from everyone about why this should be passed. And the last time I was here, like I said, hate is not a crime, it's an emotion. Okay, you can't legislate emotion, so you can't make hate a crime. Because if you're going to make hate a crime, why not make some other emotion a crime? Why not love? Why not happiness or sadness? You can start to legislate that next too, or force people to like each other. So keep that in mind. It's emotion-based, not logic-based.
Thank you, sir.
Christina Smith.
Good evening, Mayor and Council folks, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm just going to make a few points. Most of the points have already been made, but there is one that I would like to share. And the points that I make, I'd really encourage you to consider these as you make that vote tonight. The first one, it's unconstitutional. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It violates our First Amendment. Also, when you're talking about a hate crime, you're getting into thought crimes. I mean, I don't even know how you could really legislate that. So, you know, we're going into thought crimes when you pass a hate crime ordinance. Also, as the gentleman before me just mentioned, this is actually discrimination. You are discriminating against people who do not fall into one of the categories. So if I don't fall into one of the categories that's protected, then when my perpetrator is tried, their sentence will actually be less than somebody else who fell into one of the groups. And that's not fair. That's discrimination. So please consider that. a lady mentioned this earlier, and I do believe this is probably the real reason this ordinance is being considered, and it's economic reasons, it's money reasons. There are many foreign green companies coming into South Carolina, and these foreign companies have a woke agenda, and they are requiring that the communities, the towns, the counties, the states that they come in have to have hate crime legislation. This is a fact, and you can look that up. The last thing that I want to point out is that there are many unintended consequences to legislation like this, and that you can look up as well. Canada has had hate crime legislation, and their our Supreme Court, their court has just ruled that biblical speech, when you're talking about certain subjects, biblical speech is a hate crime. And that has just taken place in Canada. So we're opening up a can of worms, consequences, unintended consequences that we don't know about if you pass this ordinance. So please consider those points. Thank you.
Bob Menges.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I do thank you for the opportunity to speak for you tonight. I know that you'll carry a large responsibility on your shoulders. I'm thankful for what you do. I know that what you do is probably a thankless job many times. And even though I may disagree with you at times, I am thankful for your offering to serve in the positions that you do. I come to you as a 40-year resident of South Carolina, 22 years resident of beautiful town of Summerville since I retired from the U.S. Air Force, and with 24 years as a professor of constitutional law. And I just want to mention a couple things to you. Many of the things that I've heard tonight, I'll try to respect what you said, Mayor, and not to repeat those things. If you would permit me just to emphasize some key points of those things. I would like to say that I'd like to think there's not a person in this chamber tonight that doesn't recoil at the vitriol pointed at to two gentlemen that spoke here earlier tonight. I would like to think that even those of us in opposition to this ordinance would decry that kind of bigotry, anti-Semitism that was also mentioned earlier, racial hatred. I would like to think there's nobody inside these walls that would want to direct that kind of hate and vitriol at a human being made in the image of God. But as has been noted, and I just want to emphasize that the issue of speech. So this ordinance is not directed at speech. I clearly recognize that. I think many in the room recognize that at this point in time. However, as was just pointed out by the speaker before me, I was prepared to tell you about Canada's law. Canada, probably about 10 years ago, passed a hate crimes law in all of the provinces of Canada. And then just maybe 3 years ago, they morphed that to speech and they began arresting people for it. And then just 2 days ago, they announced that they're going to go after speech that perpetrated in the past, even before their laws were passed. And this could be anything that is, has also been pointed out tonight, the subjectivity of the term hate has morphed. We've seen it happen in Canada. So this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory that I'm putting before you tonight, some kind of worry about something that won't happen. We've seen it happen. So the issue of speech is real, even though it's not in this ordinance. That's where we go. This is the logical precursor to hate speech, quote unquote hate speech. And ladies and gentlemen, my friends that are serving us in this community, we don't deal with bad ideas. And that's what these things are. They're horrible ideas. This kind of hate and vitriol that was heard tonight, anti-Semitism, racial hatred, those start with hateful ideas in the mind. We don't deal in our country with bad ideas in the with the brute force of government. We deal with them in the arena of debate. Jefferson referred to the brute force of government. When you pass an ordinance, I heard it said a little bit earlier that you can't make certain laws. All of us in this room know you can do anything that you want to tonight. You can pass any kind of ordinance that you want, whether or not those things are the right things for you to do or the constitutional things for you to do are two completely different issues. When you pass an ordinance like this and stair step, so what is to happen in years to come when this goes to a speech ordinance? Because that's the logical step. Again, not pie in the sky. We've seen it happen. And my pastor, for instance, who's preaching something that he believes is biblical about lifestyles, and he does that, are you guys going to be behind that arrest of that pastor? Again, not hypothetical. We've seen it happen in Canada over and over again already. So I just want you to think about those things and be aware of that. It was already mentioned. I do want to emphasize the 14th Amendment was emphasized. I did hear it say that this is not any kind of a constitutional violation. It was mentioned a couple of times already about the idea that, for instance, just to use the example that was given, a horrific clubbing of an individual. If my wife was clubbed to death because she was in the way of someone leaving Publix, is she going to get less justice because somebody clubs another person to death, and because they did it because they shouted a slur, a hateful slur at that person? That's the violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, this will stand until somebody challenges it when you do this tonight. But you have a great responsibility. Our frame of our incredible God-blessed nation set up and designed a system in our republic that allows people like you to be elected as civil servants to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Mingus.
Thank you, sir.
Rona Toombs.
Pull my pants down first and riding up my legs. Hello, I'm Rona Toombs, and thank you, Mr. Touchberry. Last month during the opening of the meeting, you explained one of the reasons why you wanted to pass this ordinance was because businesses from away would not come to establish themselves here in our community unless we have a hate, intimidation, speech ordinance. It doesn't, wait a minute, that's not speech. But in any case, that is the whole purpose for this thing. It's not really a care about whether or not people are hateful to each other or not. It's whether or not we're going to draw businesses from off here and establish themselves here and create communities here and bring their employees here and establish businesses and jobs here, jobs for our people. Well, the jobs that they're going to bring are janitorial jobs, mail clerk jobs, administrative clerk jobs. They're not going to be high-paying jobs because the people that they bring with them are already going to be the employees that they're going to bring with them, high-paying jobs. They're going to buy houses here. They're going to invest in our community. But we will have established a hate ordinance here in order for a company to come here who will not come here unless we have it established. And I'm begging you not to let that happen, because once you let that kind of a company here, you're going to let other companies here. And this ordinance is a Trojan horse for precisely what the gentleman behind me was talking about. I've been watching the news up in Canada too. I've been watching how this hate ordinance, and not just in Canada, in places like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia. Those towns have these kind of ordinances already. And what's happening in those towns? Hate is going on right now. People are screaming intifada, intifada. Are those people being arrested? No. Who gets arrested? The person who comes and tries to stop them from saying those things and doing them. So the law is turned around. The person who is being offended ends up being the criminal. The offender becomes the one that is protected. So I'm not going to go any further than that, but I know that this is a financial deal. And I hope that you rethink bringing companies that want progressive thinking into our community, who will bring their progressive thinking employees with them to establish themselves into our community and change the politics of this community. And that's precisely what they're planning on doing. Thank you.
Cantor Sarah Geller. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Kathy Jacobs. Jill Blades.
Does that mean I have 15 minutes? Oh, thank you. So, Ms. Toombs just mentioned those, hi, I'm Jill Blades. Thanks a lot for having me again, and I really appreciate it. Ms. Toombs just mentioned those cities that have passed laws like this, but I want to tell you some other cities. North Charleston just 10 minutes ago unanimously passed their anti-hate crime ordinance. But these are some other cities that have passed them: Bluffton, South Carolina; Columbia, South Carolina; Charleston; Chester, South Carolina; Clemson, South Carolina; Florence, Greenville, Hardeeville, the town of Mount Pleasant, and the city of Myrtle Beach. Again, earlier I was just planning to make a joke about how many legal scholars were in the room tonight, but then a real legal scholar stood up. So I'll do away with that one. But I do want to address the fact that everyone who has stood up to speak against this ordinance, I have not seen one minority, non-white, non-Christian person do that. And we talk about extra protection, or a gentleman just used the term, you know, is that victim worthy of more justice, or a different kind of justice? But when we talk about equality, we also have to consider equity. And I think folks who have never had to experience hatred based on the basis of their gender or their religion or their ethnicity or their skin color, those people are lucky. You're lucky you don't need this extra protection. You don't know what it's like to live this way. And it is just an abomination to get up person after person and ignore the people in your community who are asking for this protection. We need the extra help. You do not need the extra help. Please just meet us where we are and where we're asking for that. So I would like to know how many Blacks, Jews, and LGBTQ folks signed Mr. Myler's petition. It's not impressive to me that he was able to gather 300 signatures of people who've never experienced the hate I was just talking about in this town. And there's been a lot of worry about the police and judges and juries figuring out what is a hate crime. But I think that the court system is well equipped to figure out motives of crimes. They do it every day. That is something that they work on, and we shouldn't discredit them and their abilities. We've been written off as emotional and said that these are emotional pleas, but again, we have no choice but to be emotional because we are so marginalized, and this affects my children. And I have to tell you, if this was motivated by money, my daughter, who was just here before her dad was able to pick her up, and I'm so glad she did not sit through this, she is worth about $48, so she cannot bring a whole lot to the table like a corporation might. But a vote for this ordinance is a vote for my daughter. And my generation is the future generation of leaders in this town, and their generation follows. And there's probably a generation in the middle because I waited a long time to have kids, but we can't be written off as emotional. We're real people who bring a lot to the table. Also, this is a deterrent. This follows you. This type of crime follows you. Employers deserve to know if they could potentially hire a bigot. There's a long-term deterrence factor when we talk about establishing a culture that deters hatred among our children. I want my children to be raised in a town that has said out loud, we don't allow this. I also want you all to know that hateful groups do come to towns where there aren't protections like this to kind of infuse it with their activity. And that is deterred like it has been in Mount Pleasant now and in Myrtle Beach by these ordinances. Let's see. This is not a woke agenda. If you look at what's happening on college campuses now, those are what you would call the wokest of the woke people promoting anti-Semitism, dangerous anti-Semitism. The Canadian legislation that just passed, it eliminates the use of belief in a religious text as a defense against hate crime charges. So that also would be like using the Quran to call for jihad against white Christians. That law is also for everyone. We can't fall into misinformation. And I just think we have to do our best to protect every single person in this community. And thank you so much for your time.
Chris McClure.
Sorry, I was a little taken off guard. I thought it was gonna be for a lot longer. I'll try to keep it short. But I'm speaking today in favor of the hate intimidation ordinance, as I believe it represents the values of Somerville. When my parents moved our family here from Miami, Florida 12 years ago, it was the first time that I started to be more aware about my skin color as a Hispanic person. I was very aware of my culture, but for some reason, I just kind of kept noticing that, like being more aware of my skin color. I was teased, often very odd and rude questions, such as, "Are you?" Skin color, asking me if I was Mexican or mixed or whatever stereotypes came to mind. Oddly enough, having a white stepdad and white brother with a Latin American mother, I often heard comments about how odd my family looked. Not exactly the most pleasant thing in the world, but I'm proud to say that Somerville has come a long way from that tone. I can see it at my church. I can see it at the farmer's market and Third Thursday, whether it be the diversity of the residents in the town, whether they are local or have moved here, or the questions asked being much more thoughtful, respectful, and genuinely curious over time. I say all this because I feel that the ordinance is an obvious next step in protecting its residents and visitors, as it says in the ordinance. I read it as a law that protects all people equally, whether you are a majority or minority. I was surprised at the reaction at the last meeting when I was listening to it online as I was going to work downtown. I felt compelled enough to come down here early from work because I'm lucky enough to have an employer that is willing to let me leave early because I-26 is pretty killer. But I felt as if I had read a different document than those in opposition. I also got the impression that there seemed to be some that were using the ordinance as a statement about other current events going on within our town. While they may seem related, I believe they're disjoint. I'm not here to push for a specific team. I'm here because I believe this ordinance makes a clear statement on the values of Somerville and shows that we're willing to label criminals and inform the public on individuals that behave in this manner. I'd like to close this out just by asking for those that believe it's a feel-good ordinance or that it's not necessary, to the parents in the audience, wouldn't you want to know if your son or daughter was dating someone with a hate-based crime? or charge on their record. In the news, wouldn't you want to know if a suspect has a history of discrimination based on, like, actually conducting hate crimes, not hate speech, hate crimes? The question I'd just like to ask is, why wouldn't we want to know this information? Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Have a good rest of the day.
Roman Hands.
Evening, I'm Roman Hammis, Somerville resident, also a business owner here in Somerville. Ms. Johnson Wilson, I appreciate your op-ed that I got that newspaper in my driveway that comes every Wednesday. Your op-ed was in there, and I first became aware that this was even an issue, and I appreciate that. In your op-ed, you asked the question, you don't understand how anybody could be opposed to this ordinance. And my question when I read your op-ed was, what's the point of the ordinance? What are the reasons for it? And let's do a recap of what we've heard tonight as far as substance goes. The substance of what we've heard tonight is 3 grown men who have had bad experiences over the course of their life. Okay. You have one example of a swastika being painted, not in Somerville, somewhere in Charleston. And then we have sort of a dubious claim that there's a bunch of hate groups moving to South Carolina. That's all there is. Now, there has been some allegations about this being business related. Maybe there's some businesses that'll move here if you pass this ordinance. I haven't heard anybody say that. I'd be curious to hear the council talk about that and address that if that's really the reason that we're doing this. The goal of the council is to represent this great town, which I think is the best town in the state of South Carolina. And I'm just a little bit curious about in March, azaleas blooming, one of the 2 best months weather-wise that we have over the course of the year with October. And somebody decided, you know what the town of Somerville needs? It needs a hate ordinance. And I'm just a little bit curious about how that came about. So I'd encourage you to vote no on it, but I do want to hear about the business reasons for it. Thank you.
Gio Libertino.
In an ideal world, hate has no place in our society. The unfortunate reality, however, is that we do not live in an ideal world. Before my family and I moved here from Philadelphia, I saw there firsthand attempts to police hatred out of the local community. I also witnessed that these attempts did not and do not work. They did not work because the reality is that hate does not live in society. It lives in the hearts of individuals. It cannot be excised by rules or laws. It can only be conquered by love. And no force, police, governance, or any other can impel or induce love where it does not exist. On the surface, attempts to remove hatred from our communities seems like a positive direction, and on principle, I would agree with the intentionality of this ordinance. And I also believe that our founding fathers who wrote our laws and constitution would have agreed with the intentionality of this ordinance. But the intention of this ordinance is different than the reality, and there's a reason our wise founding fathers never attempted to make rules to prohibit demonstrations of hatred. Last session of this council, a man who spoke this podium asked why anyone would oppose such an ordinance. Why would anyone oppose trying to rid our society of hatred? This is a very good question, but it is not the question. The question is, how is hate defined and who gets to define it? Who gets to define hate because what hate is? Is it you or me? Because it's going to be different. Should it be the government who defines hatred? After all, it was the government that believed it was okay to hold slaves only some 160 years ago. If there's anyone here who believes that governments and the people who comprise them aren't immune to establishing poor social standards, the example of Nazi Germany might come to mind. While this is perhaps an extreme example, one can at least see the potential for where things can go wrong when we start relying on governments to be in control of social oversight. There are a number of excellent books that expose how the Nazi regime, through the manipulation of truth and social standards, convinced an entire society that it was okay to gather up Jews and gays and gypsies and Poles and send them off to labor camps and eventually exterminate them. Hannah Arendt, a brilliant Jewish journalist after the war, reported about how Nazis politicized and weaponized definitions of what was good and bad in order to further their agenda. So what groups will be involved in defining what hatred is? What agendas will they push? And who will be the people accusing and denouncing others for hateful behavior? Will they all be honest people? And what will their definitions of hatred be? Anyone at any time in any place can say anything against any other person. What might be a simple misunderstanding between two people could be construed as hateful exchange, especially with the wrong mindset of the accusatory party. Worse still, allowing random individuals who might be spiteful or vengeful, have hidden agendas or ulterior motives, to report others for the possibility of something being hateful can quickly convert a well-intentioned social directive into a tool of ill will. With the ability for any individual to accuse and denounce others of any crime should immediately come images of a Soviet-style apparatus that will just as easily have more good and innocent people in fear of saying something wrong by mistake than it will evil and guilty people of actually saying something offensive. Is this the kind of society that we want to promote? And what makes anyone think that those who get to define what hatred is today will be the same people empowered to define it tomorrow? I've seen people in the Philadelphia government, in academic offices of the highest universities, in the hospital where my father worked, try to establish or enforce rules of conduct by which to cancel perceived wrongdoers, only to be later canceled themselves by the same provisions they had earlier created. Definitions can be changed, politicized, and weaponized. It's a slippery slope. Whatever good intentions those who promote this ordinance may have, the potential negative repercussions of it far outweigh any possible benefit it might bring. And I say might bring because there are no guarantees that any such ordinance will actually yield the positive effects that are hoped for. And once the ball starts rolling, there will be people running around using such new regulation to report others who they simply don't like, possibly even inventing stories. Once people start misusing the system, which invariably they will, this will then encourage and empower others who have been wrongly accused to misuse the system against those who are their accusers. And in this way, this new system, intended to rid our communities of hatred, will actually come to generate and foster more hatred and more division. For the people of this room who want to rid society of hatred, go out into the world, get to know your brothers and sisters, be kind to others, teach your children to love. That is how to conquer hatred, not through laws and rules and policing shaped by the subjectivity of those who stand behind the curtain and make them. And I'd like to just add that in reference to the question posed by the woman speaking before, on my mother's side, my background is North African, and on my mother's side, it's Jewish. So I know what those things are like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Frank.
Well, good evening. It's it's an interesting time in this town and in this room. As I said last time, if I was unfamiliar with, what this ordinance contained, and from hearing everybody talk, it's clearly I haven't read it, right? What are the actual penalties that are in here? If you commit a crime and it is demonstrably motivated by hate, you get an extra up to $500 and 30 days in jail. No one's getting bankrupt. No one's getting sent to the gulag. People who have not read this ordinance have come up here and said things that are blatantly untrue about it. And they declare that we read. We have people who can't even do basic news literacy saying that Canada has passed a rule against Christianity. I can do a 30-second Google search while I'm sitting there and find out that that is patently false. So if you're going to come up in front of a town and say we should do or not do something, at least do the basic level of research before you do so. Moving on, we can all agree that the penalties for these actions are insufficient to address the evil of bigotry and hatred. We know $500 doesn't restore a child's innocence. 30 days won't remove the fear a person has to live in when they realize their race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, or faith makes them a target for the hateful, violent, and ignorant. I've heard a lot of talk about freedom of speech, both last time and tonight. They seem to ignore a whole lot of other constitutional things like the separation of church and state, freedom of expression, freedom from intimidation, and freedom from violence motivated by hate. I have heard someone come up here and say that our founding fathers didn't vote for this. You know why? They owned slaves. Of course, they weren't going to pass a hate ordinance. They were engaged in the subjugation of people. We can sit here and prop up these documents and these symbols that we say are so, wonderful, but they are also highly divisive because the people who passed them had no idea about women having the right to vote, people of color having the right to vote, or even be free human beings. How dare you come up here and make a declaration like that? In addition to that, we have seen white officers in this town's police department harm and kill Black men. We've seen school board members from Dorchester County post white supremacist memes on Facebook with no penalty to it. In addition to that, I have seen white people come up here and say that we don't have a racism problem. It took us 15 years after Brown versus Board of Education to desegregate schools in South Carolina and in this town. In addition to that, there are 2 known historical lynchings in Dorchester County. In addition to that, we are adjacent to the, there is a man by the name of, and I had to do some research on this wonderful place that I now live. I'm so sorry. Give me a moment. Kyle Rogers' writings motivated Dylan Roof's Charleston 9 thing. They want to point and say swastikas didn't happen. A man who lived in this town is directly connected to Dylan Roof. It was proven, it is factual, it happened. That's 9 people that were murdered simply for the color of their skin, welcoming someone to their home. Walter Scott was shot in the back by police officers in a racially motivated thing. We have seen a young 13-year-old brutalized in a racially profiled situation in this town for selling flowers in front of Walmart. There is a hate problem here. If people are so bold to come up here that are business owners, clergy, mayoral candidates, and defend hatred, clearly there's a deep-seated problem that people feel so bold to say these things. There is nothing in this that is unconstitutional. There are 48 states across the United States that have hate ordinances on the books. We are one of 2, as previously stated, Wyoming and us. This council has a unique opportunity tonight to demonstrate leadership and moral courage. You cannot continue to be complicit with this kind of behavior. And when you have citizens that feel so bold to come up here and declare it's their moral and foundational right to hate people, and that businesses coming here, what was that? Okay. At the end of the day, they don't want certain types of people here. You heard that in the type of businesses they described. They do not care about equality or equity for people in this town. They want to remain comfortable. And that is their core reason. It's not about foundational rights. It's not about freedoms. It's about the ability to remain comfortable and not have their status quo challenged. And I request, I plead as both a 20-year military veteran that we do not let perfect be the enemy of progress. You cannot let perfection be the enemy of progress. That's all.
Kathy Lauder.
Mr. Mayor, Council, wow. I didn't come here with the intention to speak. I came here because when I saw the article in the Journal, it just about the comments and, you know, a lot of people in this room have never been marginalized. They've not. They've not. And I know I'm going to be all over the place because I didn't really plan. But the one thing I do want to say, and it is about equality, civil rights for all. And there is a story I want to tell. Some of you know me. I work over at the Senior Center. I teach classes. I work at the YMCA. I'm a retired physical education teacher, athletic director in Charleston County. And I just try to go about and be me. And hopefully that doesn't offend anyone. Sometimes my jokes do, but anyway. But there's a young lady, a friend of mine, and her grandmother and I are real good friends. And this young lady middle school, had to go to therapy because these trucks that ride around with the F Biden signs on them and the Let's Go Brandon and all that. And that doesn't offend anybody. That doesn't offend people because that's their free speech. I'm sorry, that's offensive to me. But anyway, I digress. But you know, this is a nice town. But honestly, I've been in the process past few years trying to relocate myself to Asheville. Now that North Charleston has passed over, I was just in Park Circle the other night, and it is the diversity. But some of you don't want diversity. You're happy with the status quo. You've, like I said, you've never been marginalized. And then, you know, you want to talk about that government can't legislate feelings. They want to legislate what a woman can do. I won't go any further with that. But back in, so I wasn't planning on speaking, but this one thing I did look up, and this was back in 1990. On February 8, 1990, the United States Senate passed the Hate Crime Statistics Act by a 92-4 vote. April 23rd, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed it into law, and he quoted Martin Luther King and said, "We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." Bush added, "We must rid our communities of the poison we call prejudice, bias, and discrimination. The Hate Crime Statistic Act is an important further step towards the protection of all American civil rights." Everyone is entitled to their civil rights. Last thing, I don't like that word woke, but you know, I've always understood woke to mean being aware, to being conscious, to being involved, and to being inclusive. So then I had to look and see what the opposite of woke was: groggy, asleep, brain dead, or zombie. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that's all I have for public comment for items on the May 9th agenda. Under pending bills and resolutions, the second and final reading of an ordinance to amend the ordinance of the town of Somerville, chapter 16, article 1, by adding a new section 16 entitled Hate Intimidation.
I make a motion that we move it forward and approve.
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to make an observation while I'm sitting here looking back at the audience. And it seems that many of those who talked about being against the ordinance told us what our motivations were and why we're doing this. And none of anything I heard was true. There is no company coming here if we do this. I know it comes from back when it originally happened and the state turned it down and some sports groups didn't come. In town, we haven't had that. This is just, and I guess on the other side, I have to say, all they talked about is what they need. That I don't think I heard anybody accuse us of anything. While we've been accused of being Russians, Nazis, and everything else from the people opposed, which I find interesting.
Good.
I'd like to say, I recognize there's many people in this room that are in my district and that have voted for me even, and many that I've done business with here in the town many times. I've received a lot of calls, text, emails, countless ones. I can't keep up with them as of today. But I've been through, I've read every single one of them. I've counted the amount in support and in opposition. I've really taken all of that to heart. I prayed about it, and I don't know of any business coming to town here at all. That's not been a topic that council has discussed at all. But after praying about it and viewing both sides of all comments, and in my district, both sides of all comments, you know, I have to vote my conscience, and I have to vote, you know, the total number of in support versus not in support. So I am in support of this ordinance.
Councilman.
Mr. Mayor, I had a whole list of things to talk about tonight, and then for the sake of brevity, I'll summarize a bit. What it really comes down to with me for this ordinance is, what does it do? That's the question I've asked myself. I've heard the words here tonight. We heard the words last month, and also heard and read the thousands of emails we've received. That's a little, I guess, inflation on the number of emails, but there's been quite a few. So as I study it, it just really comes down to, I haven't been convinced of anything to what I've read that this ordinance will do anything to stifle free speech. I agree with that 100%. I don't think it does anything to stifle free speech. At the same time, I don't think it does anything to provide protection that the people that have spoke in favor of this ordinance are looking for. I've been involved with public safety a little bit, and in my mind, this doesn't do that. So I guess what does it do? And I really can't come up with anything. It's funny. One of the gentlemen who spoke tonight spoke of almost read off of my paper what I wrote down about about what you can do with if this ordinance is passed. A person still can walk down the street spewing blasphemous comments that are awful, that I would never want to listen to myself, nor would I want my children or hopefully future grandchildren that moved this down to hear as well. On the flip side of that, and that's because the person that's spewing those ugly words can't be convicted of this crime alone without first getting out and hitting somebody with a baseball bat. Well, after you've hit someone with a baseball bat, the time for protection is over. The damage has been done by that time. So in essence, what I've really come down to is we have an ordinance that we're taking up in front of us that really doesn't do anything that I can tell. And as a person that's always been outcome focused, I believe in taking action that it will actually produce a favorable outcome that I don't believe this will do. I'm not going to support this ordinance tonight.
I'll go ahead next. I really appreciate, first of all the emails that we've received, the telephone calls, and all of you, each of you being here. I personally know many of you that are out there. I'm friends with you, and I want you to know that how I vote tonight is not a personal thing against you. So don't take offense to that. I've prayed about this and I've thought a lot. I've listened to each one of you and I've gone back and forth. I hate that we are up here making this decision. I really think that this should be a state thing. And in fact, I know that they have something up on the table right now. I don't know where it's going to go. I heard a lot of great things from both sides that you said tonight. There was some misinformation. I think some of you are not aware exactly how the ordinance is written and what it says. And then I think some of you are speculating beyond that. Also, I have been assured by our town attorney that everything is written such that they can hold a person responsible if, first of all, they commit a crime and they say something of hatred that goes along with that, or they do a deed of hatred. Okay, so first of all, we know that. So it's the person that's just in their car going down the street and yells something out the window. They're not going to get arrested for that. Unfortunately, those people that do that are people that just haven't learned correctly in life about love and how to deal with others, unfortunately. I am in agreement with what exactly will this ordinance do. The thing that I see is there's going to be an additional fine and or additional jail time. I don't think that that's going to make a difference. What we put on here, I think $500 or something like 30 days in jail. I don't think that's going to make any difference for a person that's going to go out and commit the crime. I don't think that that's going to be a deterrent. In my opinion, it should be much more than that. It should be $40,000, and it should be an additional five years in jail, prison. I think it needs, but I think again, that the state needs to take care of this. And based on those things that I've said tonight, that's probably how I'm going to vote.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting, I enumerated both my support of the ordinance and concept and my concerns, so I'm not going to go through those again. One thing we can all agree on is that people are passionate on both sides of the issue. If the goal is to tell the world that Somerville is not a bunch of bigots and racists, I believe that a resolution would accomplish the same thing as an ordinance that we can all agree really has no teeth in it. We have to address this measure tonight and move on to other important things. If the measure passes, fine, I'm okay with that. But if the measure fails, I'm going to make a motion that we have our town attorney draft a resolution saying essentially the same thing.
One last thing, I think we all here on both sides hope if this gets passed, I think it's the intention of all of our hearts that this never is used, but crimes that are motivated by hateful speech or feelings or whatever it might be, or even hate speech, if this ordinance makes that just a little tiny bit better, makes somebody second guess, even hateful speech, makes someone second guess, robbing that home and spraying that graffiti of certain signs. Even if it's just a little, we've helped make this world a better place, a little bit more loving place. And so I am in support of this.
May I have one more?
Yes, sir.
Comment? Just piggyback on what was said earlier. I do believe another thing that we can do as a council is to encourage our legislators to pass the state law that they are taking up essentially, or will be taking up again in the year to come, in the next session to come. So if that takes a resolution to do the same, I would recommend that in the future as well too.
Right. Any other comments from council? Before calling for the question, I want to share what I shared with one of the news stations earlier today. They asked, what do you hope the outcome for this evening is? And I explained that I hope that we come together as a community, whether we agree or disagree, and have a respectful discussion. I want to say that I commend our citizens for having a respectful discussion this evening. And for an in-state, my hope was that no matter where this lands, whether it's voted in or voted out, that our community is strengthened and unified through this process. I will say, from my perspective, that the greatest asset in our community are people, and that's the full cross-section of citizens, business owners, and visitors that we have here. I believe that for those who may not experience hate or may be in positions of power or majority, it's extremely important, and it's a responsibility from my perspective to make sure that those who are not in that level of authority or majority, that they're protected and that they are, from my perspective, heard. This ordinance may not stop crime. We know the speed limit near Mr. Neal's house is not always followed. We know that thou shalt not murder has not been listened to for quite some time. And my hope is that we add a level of deterrent for reasonable people who don't want to be labeled as someone who hates. In regards to the comment about economic development opportunities and business investment, I was referencing the Municipal Association who has, supported folks like us, municipalities who want to be open for investment, has encouraged doing this in the absence of our state legislative delegation taking action on this. And we've had multiple municipalities that have already been listed, and I'm not aware of any issues popping up from those municipalities that have had these hate ordinances in place. I commend our attorney, GW, for taking all of the feedback presented to us in writing and modifying and strengthening and amending this ordinance to be where it is today. And for that, I'm very grateful for you, sir. So with that, we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All righty, motion passes.
Second and final reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Section 2-97 entitled Order of Business to include executive session and other business.
Mr. Mayor, I move for second and final reading of the ordinance.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
For introduction of bills and resolutions, first reading of an ordinance to adopt an operating budget for the town of Somerville, South Carolina for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025.
Mr. Mayor, I
I'll
move
make-
for- oh, go ahead.
Got to beat you at something. I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'll vote on the first reading. I do still, want to consider some changes to it, but I will vote on the first reading.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to take a moment to commend our town staff and Ms. Rhonda and her team for putting together an excellent budget for us this year to look at without a tax increase or increases of that nature. So thank you all for the work you've done on this.
I think it's worth noting that, and I want to commend also our department heads, and our town staff. I do want to note that the requests that came from our departments, and I do believe that departments came with legitimate requests. Those requests exceeded our budget by almost $6 million. And our town staff, without raising taxes, was able to whittle that budget down to balance the budget. I regret that we cannot give our departments everything they ask for, that we can't give our employees the raises that they much deserve. But without raising taxes, which I'm not in favor of, I think they did a very commendable job balancing that budget.
And I'd just like to say, I don't like the fact that we're spending some of our general funds. My hope would be that we sell property to cover those before we have to use them.
All right, thank you, council members. Any other? Thank you again, Rhonda and staff. I think y'all were highlighted there, and our department heads for pulling together and really sharpening your pencil. Great points, Councilman Holter. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
First reading of an ordinance to amend the Somerville Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 2, Section 2.3.6A, encroachments, Chapter 4, Section 4.2.5, frontage encroachments, and Chapter 13, Section 13.7.1, zoning and development permit. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move the item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their meeting on May 6, 2024.
Mr. Mayor. I would move, but Ms. Beth, I guess you have to read these, but I would move for approval of items C, D, E, and F that were.
All right, we have a motion and a second
C. Well, the one you just read on
for
through.
B, C, D, E, and F for first reading.
Yes.
All right, this is a motion and a second for items B, C, D, E, and F for first reading. Any discussion?
Yeah, it's going to generate some discussion when you pick up 5 items at one time. Yeah.
I think we discussed them pretty much at length on. going-
I'm
going on
okay.
tonight.
I'm okay because these are all first reading, but that's, if you don't know, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I'm okay with first reading on item B. I do think it needs a little bit of massaging, to make it right.
Yes.
I have no discussion on item C. On item D, I do have some concerns on that. But again, because it's a first reading, we still have time to hash that out before next month.
Yes, sir. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Under miscellaneous, consideration to adopt a proposed 2024 CDBG annual action plan.
I'll make a motion that we approve that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the annual action plan. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say, first, I mean, I know this is a big undertaking, these CDBG funds, so I commend her a lot. She's not here, is she? Not saying that. Okay. For putting this together because it's a labor of love project. I do feel like that there were some, other better uses for some of these funds. Will this be a final reading, GW, or will we have to hear this again? This is a final? Okay. Yeah, then with that, I'd just like to say, I did vote and support the 250,000 to the homeless shelter. However, I feel like they should fundraise and do other things for their operational costs because we're already giving them 250,000. I thought that could go for other uses such as sidewalks and crosswalks in areas of that census district. I also feel like that the 106,000 on the stormwater and flood drain projects could have done some there, and I feel like some of that could have also went into sidewalk and crosswalk projects or other flooding or drainage that would affect more of the bulk of the town. So, you know, unfortunately, I can't vote on this in good faith, but I think the cause is great, and I think she's worked very hard on it, so.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to give a congratulations to Pam White, who handled this situation for us, and she did a very good job. We were able to help some needy people, and some of the things listed here were also taken into consideration. I know that we were talking about working with the DCCO Home of Hope and making a contribution of $250,000. And I know that might be a little tight on us, but I do believe that we have a symbiotic relationship with Dorchester County. And I think it's almost incumbent upon us to support that effort.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Approval of a letter for Woda Cooper Companies in support of application for state tax credit application for their project at 615 North Cedar Street. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move the item to full council with no recommendation at their meeting on May 6, 2024.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to we approve a letter for Wood Cooper Companies in support of an application for a state tax credit that will yield us some affordable housing, which we really need in the town of Somerville.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And this is for the letter for Woda Cooper. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do want to point out that, if we approve this, they still have to, their application still has to be approved and they still have to come before the town's, commercial design review board. And having sat on that board for, several terms, I can tell you that they're not going to approve vinyl siding. We're not going to approve vinyl siding. Okay.
Excellent point. Any other, discussion?
Well, certainly they'll have to go through all of the hoops.
Yeah,
I
that's-
agree with, Matt.
I think the important thing to,
But,
I'm sorry, Mr.
we need affordable housing, and most of the ones that have been built in Dorchester County and the lower part down here has been built in the county. And we certainly need some in the city limits also.
And I will say that, I'm not a real big fan of additional apartments, townhomes being built in the town, bringing more cars in and out of our town. But because a portion of this will be affordable housing, which we greatly need, and we will be getting, the tax on all of this, I will be voting for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that, you know, we really aren't getting into the weeds of the design process or anything of that nature with this, you know, we're just, they're looking for a letter of support. So, and for that, I will be voting in favor of this.
So I will say, I'm going to vote in favor for the letter of support because I understand that helps you get approval for some funding to help finish this project or to get it going wherever you decide to build it. So I'm in support of a letter for this project. But I'm not in support of the project going through in this area. I think there's lots of great tracks on 78 and other areas that do fall in an opportunity zone. I'm a huge proponent of affordable housing. I've built some myself in the past. But in looking at a lot of the comments online about similar development projects with the organization and looking at that particular location, I would be happy to support the letter, but not that project and at that location.
And I will support it. A little skeptical. But the height restrictions on that site of 78 change. And I think taking advantage of that, putting retail downstairs would make a great difference in making it mixed use. And kind of helps everybody out and it'll give those people jobs.
I'll just add, because I know there's probably a lot of confusion based on, we had a presentation and had sort of a design given. I think, Councilman Halter, you made a good point that the town's processes have not changed. Our zoning has not changed, and our development ordinances and processes have to be followed even if we issue this letter. So just so everybody knows, we're not giving any special treatment. We're just supporting their tax credit. So hearing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Site plan approval for Dream Short Central Beautification Project within Central Avenue and West Second South Street right-of-way. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move the item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their meeting on May 6th, 2024.
I make a motion that we approve.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Appointment of a Board of Appeals for business licenses.
Mr. Mayor, I move for council to appoint the members of the Public Safety Committee, Aaron Brown, Kim Gordon Smith, and Matt Halter to serve as the appeals board to hear the appeal from the decision of the business license official not to renew the business license of Playground Lounge. This motion is made in pursuant to town ordinance section 8-46. Yes, I'm illiterate.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think I missed a conversation somewhere.
You may have missed an email.
Okay,
Congratulations.
thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
For public comment, Pastor Thomas Dixon.
Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, "It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me." And I think that's pretty important. Let me add, it might keep his friend from lynching me, even if it doesn't keep him from lynching. I'm Pastor Thomas Dixon. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Council, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here today to talk on the matter of Somerville Police Officer Dante Gee. And I'm here on behalf of the mother and the family, my colleagues who also serve the community, and especially the members of our Black community here. 5 weeks ago, there was an encounter between Officer Gee and a 13-year-old over at Walmart that was not of the exemplary status that I would expect from any law enforcement officer, and definitely of the behavior of the younger person there is definitely not warranted. Okay? But I want to fill in the history for the purpose of the record for everyone here on the board. You all have a copy of what I'm stating here, only it's more in depth on what I'm going to say. Dante Gee has a history of policy violations, complaints, and lawsuits filed against him, and he was even fired once for misconduct in office. He has been employed at 3 different law enforcement agencies during his 25 years in law enforcement. He was fired from the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office for misconduct in 2003. He resigned from the North Charleston Police Department in 2018 at a time when he had 3 lawsuits against him for misconduct. And he was hired at the Somerville Police Department in 2018, 2 weeks after leaving the North Charleston Police Department while under an internal investigation for policy violations, only to be currently under investigation again for misconduct. 1997 through 1999, he worked as a correctional officer in an upstate prison where he supervised inmates and junior officers. 1999, he completed basic law enforcement training and started working at the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office, where he worked from 99 until 2003. 4 years after being hired with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office in May of 1999, Gee was fired for misconduct in September of 2003. 4 years later, the complaint against Gee in 2003, he assaulted a man during a domestic violence call. The incident, Gee and another officer responded to a domestic violence call where the complainant, the husband, alleged his wife had stolen all of his money and left. When the officers were leaving, the husband allegedly made a comment about how the next time he would take care of his wife himself. Footage allegedly showed Gee turning around and grabbing the man by his arm and placing him in handcuffs, repeatedly and forcibly pushing the man's face down on the hood of his patrol vehicle. Gee then let the man up, pushed him in his chest with his fingers, made gestures indicating the man was crazy or stupid, and called him a boy in a very demeaning voice. An employee termination letter shows that Gee was fired in 2003 for misconduct after an internal investigation, specific violation being physical or psychological abuses of members of the public and or prisoners category. 1 month later, he went to work in North Charleston. In 2005, that'll be 2 years later, Gee's 2005 annual review praised him, saying he was relentless and tireless, but it also stated that he had received an unusually high number of citizens' complaints. Gee has a tendency to become condescending and or rude, the review continued. It said he received verbal counseling and was making an effort to improve. 2010, 5 years later, in the 2010 annual review, again applauded Gee while simultaneously noted his tendency to be very abrasive and sarcastic when talking to citizens. 5 years later, 2015, the same pattern held true. Gee was lauded as being extremely dependable and knowledgeable, while it also warned him to mitigate his use of force. Gee resigned from North Charleston Police Department in 2018. 2 weeks later, he was hired at Somerville Police Department. Gee has had at least three lawsuits filed against him, costing the state for misconduct, costing the state somewhere in the vicinity of $250,000. I'm saying this because as a Somerville police officer, that's not the image that I know this city wants to have representing them. And if this council, I just want you to be educated on the person that's there. So it comes times to.
Thank you, Pastor Dixon.
Thank you.
Chaplain Rich Robinson.
May I invite the Dignity Project members to join us? Mayor and members of council, thank you so much. We wanted to give an update on the Dignity Project progress and the work that we're doing. Just as a background, the Dignity Project is a diverse group of community members. It's a grassroots organization. And we work to have hard conversations with the police department and dedicated collaborations. We've begun the process of gathering and reviewing community input concerning the recent Somerville incidents with the police department. Community members have been, it's been made available for them to offer input through an email that has been posted and publicized in the news. And they can also make that anonymously. In addition, we've met a few times with Pastor Dixon, and he's going to help us to get some community input from folks that we might not engage in usual kinds of opportunities for input. The diverse members will then begin the process of gathering and organizing all of the input into topics which will be discussed in multiple diverse community and police perspectives. So the members will listen for understanding, not just listening, but listening for understanding through participating in a series of perspective swaps where they're tasked with understanding the inputs through other perspectives than their own. So for example, the police are understanding community perspective and vice versa. And then from that conversation, we'll develop into themes, what some of the topics were from the input, and we'll begin to really delve into those. Out of that, our goal, as we've done before with developing the 3 C's, calm, cooperate, communicate, on traffic stops, the Dignity Project, along with the police, will review and begin a collaboration to work on this. Volunteering to participate in that collaboration, hear the community input and talk through it. Post-investigation will be Officer Gee and Sergeant Kathy Kirkland. Both of them have volunteered. Sergeant Kirkland has actually been on the project and participated in our last collaboration. The Dignity Project process always incorporates mutual respect, empathy, and sensitivity to deeply understanding all perspectives. We understand that truth and trust take time and patience. The dignity of the badge and of the community are to be shared, and we must all take the time and intentionality that our community deserves to make a lasting and shared progress. So I just want to thank council for the opportunity to give you an update, but also our project members. We have just a few represented here, and also your police officers who participate in the project voluntarily. Voluntarily. Chief Wright's been on just about every call since 2020 when we started 4 years ago. So it's a wonderful group. It is a group that's facilitated by the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy, but it is community members, and it's a grassroots organization that's independent. But we really all believe that the excellence of our policing requires community support and input, whether it's holding them accountable on the core values that we all agree in, or whether it's in supporting them. We've worked long and hard with the police department, and over the past 4 years to really agree on some core values of accountability, integrity, and dignity of the badge and of the community. So we're very grateful for this opportunity, and we'll continue to work through a lot of the community perspectives and concerns, and we'll update you as we develop our collab. Thank you.
Just a minute, my mic. This dignity project's been going on for a number of years, and I certainly salute these gentlemen and this lady for what they're doing. I think they've been assisting Somerville Police Department to stay pretty much even keel on what they're required to do and what they're not supposed to do. I spoke with a young lady today who's just joined you guys, and I helped her out when I was the discipline hearing officer with School District 2. But anyway, she's overjoyed to be a member. And currently, how many membership, what's the membership now for you?
We have a few applications in. I think it's probably around 18, Darcy.
Yeah. Good.
Probably a little more. It's probably closer to 20. And we have police officers as well.
And you're still holding your arms open for new people that want to participate, right? Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Lynn Marshall. That's all I have for public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I move we enter executive session to discuss personnel matter related to the town administrator search.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.